I'm Ayona Datta. I'm from here, from King's College, Reader in Urban Futures, and I'm the PI on this project. The plan today is that, of course, the first session, me and the other two co-Is, Melissa and Sophie, are going to generally talk about the project, the methodologies, and then we will have presentations from each of you. We've left enough space at the end of each session to have questions and answers, so we really want to get feedback, and that's really the aim of this initiation workshop. We'd like to present what we want to do, because this is just the start of our project, and we want to brainstorm with you and get some feedback and hopefully some ideas for the future as we move in to start the actual work on our project. In the beginning, I just want to say thank you to all of you to indulge us and give us your precious time. We know how precious this summer is for all of us to do research, so we're really grateful for you to have come here and giving us your 2 days or 1 day, depending on who you are. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to Marta for all the organizing. All of you would have had emails, repeated emails from Marta, and she's really smoothed out the process. So thank you very much, Marta. We couldn't have done this without you. Okay, so the project it's ESRC, it's jointly funded. It's a Newton-funded project between ESRC and ICSSR, which is the counterpart of ESRC in India. It was a special call. I think many of you have seen that call when it came out. And one of the themes on that was about the dynamics of change in small cities. And so we really thought through that, and we applied for it, and we got the funding. So now we have to start this project, which will be for 24 months. The official title is Learning from Small Cities, Governing Imagined Futures and the Dynamics of Change in India's Smart Urban Age. And we have a project Twitter handle already, and Marta's been tweeting from that. You would have probably already seen it or been included and followed by her. We also have a project website that's about to be launched. We are told it's almost done. And we will be launching, and when we do, then again, we will tweet about it, and you'll find out, and you can go there onto the website and explore more of our work as it manifests in the next 2 years. So, So that's our project team. So this is me, Ayona, then there's Melissa, Sophie, and we have Shilata, who has just joined us. She's actually starting from the 1st of September. She's our postdoctoral research associate. We have the India team, Sanjay, Brito. We will also have 3 local research assistants who will do the field work and will be actually working with the community and with us. And we also have 3 local NGO partners, because we have 3 case study cities. I'll talk about that later. And each of the NGO partners are located in each of these 3 case study cities. So we have a plan of working through that. So just before giving you brief ideas about aims and objectives, just wanted to set out the kind of conceptual framing of how we went about this. So we took learning as a kind of conceptual framing, and what do we learn, what can we learn from small cities, and particularly it goes back to early ideas of learning from past failures, like learning from Las Vegas, for example. And primarily because small cities, particularly recently, have been argued to be places with no futures. You have this recent work by Sharma and Sandhu would say, small cities have weak democratic institutions, poor urban infrastructures, and with no future. So we wanted to ask, how do people in small cities live with change, huge changes that is currently going through these places? What do they have to deal with on living up with this change on an everyday basis? And the key question we want to answer is, how do they say, what is our future? And who has the power to determine it? Well, how do they answer that question about their own future? We also are feeding into this because of certain gaps we noticed in post-colonial urban theory, which focuses a lot on megacities. A large part of the literature on post-colonial urbanism focuses on megacities like Delhi, Mumbai, etc., Joburg, etc. And we wanted to move away from that to what Barbara Harris-White calls Middle India, the Middle India which falls between the cracks of macroeconomic analysis, sectoral research, and micro-level ethnography. So we wanted to really look at what small cities could tell us, not just about how people live with the dynamics of change, but also what that would tell us about where post-colonial urbanism or post-colonial urban theory can take us. So it is to think about a new way or a post-colonial urban theory of smallness, and what does that mean in the current context. And we certainly don't think about small cities only through their settlement patterns or population or demographic change, and that's certainly one way of thinking about it, but we want to take it beyond that, to think about smallness also as an identity, as a way of thinking through one's own future and one's own location in a global geopolitical world where everyone is talking about an urban age. So we want to conceptualize India's small cities through what Bell and Jane call influence and reach rather than population size, density, or growth. What is their influence? What is their reach? How do they reach out into global policies? How do global policies reach into these smaller places? And then, of course, what does that mean in the ways that they live with these changes and think about themselves and their futures in the coming times? So the subtitle of our project is Governing Imagined Futures, and this is how we bring in the urban age or the urban futures and thinking about the rapid changes that's happening in India. All of you would have heard about the 100 smart cities. And so we positioned ourselves and the gaps in post-colonial urban theory within the oncoming future or futuring of the urban age, where the future is digital, the future is networked urbanism, the future is smarter urbanism. And where do these small cities therefore fit in? Do they relate to that future? And how do they relate to that future? And how might they even challenge that sort of future? And what we noticed when we were looking at the 100 Smart Cities mission, and the list of cities that's been put up, is a large number of those cities are actually what you would call in India Y or Z cities, that's cities with less than 1 million or 3 million population. And we thought there is a certain, it's not a coincidence, there is a reason why that is so. And so the way we theorized, or we thought about small cities, is that they are really now in India the test beds of urban futuring. And we took futuring from sociological theories. Surprisingly, there's more sociological theories on futuring than geographical. But we will sort that out. So John Urry's last work, unfortunately, was about futuring. And he talks about what is the future. And he says that the practice of futuring is a practice of extrapolating present crisis to imagine, anticipate, visualize, and own the future. So the future is also about politics and who owns it and who tells the story of the future, who narrates the future, and therefore who controls the future in the present. And small cities fit into that conceptualization of the future because they are the sites where futuring or India's urban age is currently unfolding, currently being challenged and negotiated and sometimes even fiercely fought through. So we also see, therefore, because of the way, this is actually an older picture. I was trying to get a more recent map of the distribution of smart cities. Some of these have changed. But if you actually look at the map or the distribution of the 100 smart cities across India, we can see there's a radical shift from in the economic growth strategies that were earlier invested in megacities towards targeting small cities that have historically been left behind in previous urban development programs. And there is certainly a continuity with previous national policies like JNURM, but I think we thought this particular smart cities mission had really something to say about what small cities, where small cities are positioned in India's urban future. However, what's interesting for us is because of the position of small cities and because of the earlier discussions, as we said, of how small cities have no future and small cities seen really as the failures of urbanism. There is also increased uncertainty both within these cities but also nationally about the sustainability of these highly centralized smart city technologies that are being imposed from above. And again, I'll talk about this very briefly later on. And the infrastructures of governance at national scale. So again, governance and the smart city is imagined at a city level, but being governed at a national scale, if you see what I mean. But so these national scale imaginations, how it will be governed in the future, has a continuous dialectic. It produces continuous challenges for these small cities. Because historically they have had very little data, and very little data that can be used to the service of the smart cities. There is data scarcity. But there's also broken, incomplete, or improvised infrastructures in small cities. Not to say that that doesn't exist in megacities, but there's, I think, that there's particular challenges in small cities that makes them also quite distinct in this bigger geopolitical or national debates about urban futures. So what are our research questions? And they're very broad right now, and obviously we'll hone into them as we work on this project. So first question is about imagination. How and why do small cities become the test beds of state imaginations of India's urban futures? And this relates to just what I was saying just now. How do they become so prominent in the 100 smart cities map? The second question is about governing. So how do small cities translate imagined futures into actually existing smart cities? So when the smart cities mission comes out and tells these cities that you have to become smart, how do they then translate it? How do they actually negotiate this urban governance to turn into, or what they try to turn into, smart cities? The third one is about everyday life. So how do citizens of small cities live with change that is induced by smart city developments? And this is change induced not just by material change, that is infrastructure developments and actually public works, etc., but also change induced by the rhetoric of smart city, the imaginary of smart city, and how then they again begin to position themselves through this notion of smallness or becoming smart. And then the last one is about learning. So what can we actually learn from the answers to these questions in order to inform practices of thinking and doing urban policy? So very distinct research questions in terms of very distinct themes around urban futures. So that's our flow chart. So those are the 4 research questions. The main aim is to learn from small cities by examining the dynamics of transformation into smart cities of the future. And we have these 4 questions. The first one is about imagination, governance, living, everyday life, and then learning. We have 3 case studies at the moment. We've chosen Shimla, Jalandhar, and Nashik. And so this question leads to the package of imagining urban futures, then another package of governing urban futures, and third package of grounding these futures, looking at change and looking at learning from change. And we have a number of methods, which I'll talk to in a minute, but these are also distinct methods that then add to the analysis and dissemination and impact. So the aims and objectives is, first of all, as I've already said, to produce original innovative scholarship in urban studies, first by theorizing up from small cities to really understand the fine-grained nature of how urban transformations are negotiated by the urban governments, municipalities, and also people living with this change. And then, of course, developing the fields of smart urbanism, urban futures, post-colonial urbanism, and so on. So that's a conceptual aim. The second one is to critically learn from how the state, urban authorities, and citizens of small cities imagine and implement new urban futures. And that leads us to more kind of policy aims, that is to identify what are innovative practices in our case studies that can be communicated widely to stakeholders. And that's also because one of the key aims of this funding stream from Newton is to have transformative change. So we are constantly thinking about how our concepts can feed into actual policies and transformative change. And one of the other very important aim is to build research capacity, and that's why we work with Indian scholars, but also early career scholars, both in the UK and in India, and to build research capacity, therefore, by working in partnership between academics, society partners, and stakeholders. And then finally, of course, to develop policy interventions from our learning process on smart cities and urban futures in India and elsewhere. So how does what we learn from these small cities in India help us think about places elsewhere? And then what does that mean in terms of thinking through what a theory of smallness might mean in post-colonial urbanism, and even in terms of urban futuring? So these are our methods, and Melissa and Sophie will talk about them in a bit more detail in the next 2 presentations. But we have different scales in which we're looking or investigating in this project and answering research questions. So on one hand, we have a very personal scale where our local researchers and us, we will go into communities and we will have detailed ethnography, semi-structured interviews for about 6 months in each city at least. And then we will take that up to neighborhood level where we will do some community asset mapping, which is why we have Sophia here to talk to us about that later. And then we will also use a digital tool called Map My Assets, which comes from Sophie's earlier work, and she will again talk about that later. And the idea is to think about small cities and the dynamics of change in small cities through an asset-based approach rather than an infrastructure approach or a technology-based approach. And when we take that asset-based approach, we can think about assets as both tangible and intangible. So it can be both infrastructure, but it can also be heritage and memory and nostalgia and so on and so forth. And the Map My Assets tool will try to map these tangible and intangible assets. And we will also want to look at how these notion of assets and what is actually valued as an asset in these cities change over time and change in negotiation with the top-down policies of smart cities. Then the other scale is at a city scale, where we'll do some GIS mapping, and we'll look at the longitudinal urban transformations to correlate with some of our findings from the personal and neighborhood scale. And then finally, we will do detailed policy source analysis of different types of policies, both from the state, regional level, the urban level, but also global policies, policies from ICT companies, policies from global think tanks, etc. And that will also involve stakeholder interviews. So it's multi-scalar methods, and as I said, Sophie and Melissa will talk a little bit more about that later. So just to finish off with what are our cities and why we have chosen them. Excuse me. The main reason we chose these cities, obviously, there's an issue of convenience, but there's also, I think we thought these cities fitted really well into our theorization of how we want to investigate small cities and their transformation into smart cities. And we drew upon René Véron's work, where he talks about small cities, particularly the triple challenge that is faced by small cities. And he argues that these are challenges of urbanization, development, and underdevelopment. And the 3 case studies we chosen certainly fit into that triple challenge. We also think there is a 4th challenge, and the 4th challenge is their futuring, the notion that they have to future themselves into smart cities. They have to continuously come up with visions for what they want to turn into. And in light of these 4 challenges, what are their tangible and intangible assets, particularly what do the community and how do individuals think about their tangible and intangible assets, and how can that be worked into policies, future governance, and into everyday life. So one of our first cities that we've chosen is Nashik. The second one we've chosen Shimla, and the third one Jalandhar. And just a very initial investigation of these 3 cities from the Smart Cities website will show that they are also very different. They have very different populations. So Nashik is almost 1.5. Shimla is only 169,000, and Nashik is almost 1.5 million. Jalandhar is close to 1,862,000. And their area, the metropolitan area, is also very, very different, Shimla being the smallest of the 3. Nashik is interesting because it certainly has this triple of 4 challenges, but the challenges are quite unique because Nashik is a very old historic town. It hosts the 12-yearly Hindu pilgrimage of Kumbh Mela, but it has also, because of that, has to deal with huge environmental costs, particularly to the Godavari, the river basin, and also environmental costs around forest cover, etc. But on the other hand, it's globalizing itself, and it's selling itself as a tourist base for Sula vineyards. And you might have bought Sula wine in Sainsbury's or in other places, the supermarkets. And Sula wine is one of the best wines in India, and it's got old Sula vineyards all around Nashik. So it's kind of within 2 types of identities, and it's kind of trying to reconcile both in one. But also, the smart city mission, the way it works, it gives you funding for 2 types of development, well, at least 2 types of development. One is what is called the ABD, the area-based development, and one is what is called the pan-city. Now, if you look at the pan-city development, most of the pan-city developments are into CCTV cameras, street beautifications, LED lighting, sometimes solar lighting, etc. The ABD, the area-based development, is a small part of each city that are taken up for complete redevelopment. So these can be riverfront development, these can be anything really, traffic-based development, and so on. So when you compare the three area-based development of the three cities, they are very, very, very different. And in proportion to the actual size of the city, again, very, very different. So Nashik is 259 square kilometers, but the area-based development is only 3.6 square kilometers. And that really tells you something about how many people will actually be affected by this. And in terms of the finances, only 54% of the total budget allocated to smart city is going to the ABD. So for the pan city, the entire city, what is left behind is only actually, my math is that 46% of the money goes to the rest of the city. And 3.7 square kilometers gets 54% of the budget. Same with Shimla. So you have 35 square kilometers. The area-based development is literally 1 square kilometer. And that's getting 92% of the budget. So immediately, we start seeing inequalities in the distribution of funds and resources and territories, geographies. And that's, to us, I think, very interesting to investigate further. And again, if you see Jalandhar, 101 square kilometers, and the smart city ABD is 4 square kilometers, getting 76% of the budget. And so there is a discrepancy in distribution of budget, and also a discrepancy or an inequality in the number of people actually going to be affected by the different budgets. Okay, so that's why Nashik, Shimla, and Jalandhar, at the moment, are what we have decided on. We will see how it goes, and we'll keep you updated. Now, this is my final slide. So we have impact activities planned, which obviously is going to be through the project, but also beyond the project. So 24 months is going to be continuous engagement with impact, but we hope that it will go beyond that, and certainly will lead to perhaps more impact research, the funded impact projects after this. So just very briefly, in India, I mean, I think we all, I guess, agree that one of the key aims, one of the successes of this project, or any of these projects, should be measured by the training and building capacity of local researchers and early career researchers. And I think it's very, very important for us to understand that this project is only as successful as the long-term research and career trajectories of people who we work with, both on ground and here, early career researchers particularly. So that's one of our key impact, I think, that would enhance capacity building around research on smart cities, small cities, and so on. One output that we think would be very useful is we want to create animated infographics of smart city, and we want to create a smart city asset toolkit that we can give to policymakers and planners, and we want this to be obviously very, very kind of interactive, but also very lay and visual. So we planned an animated infographics from our project with our local partners in each of these cities. And there may be more later on. We're starting with one each in each local city. We want to translate our research findings into local language pamphlets and policy briefings, which will go not just to stakeholders, but perhaps also to the communities that we'll be working with. And after all our research and community workshops with the neighborhoods that we work in, we will hold a city stakeholder workshop in each of these cities that we work, in which we present our findings to stakeholders and also kind of debate and discuss our findings and feedback into the research. And then finally, we'll have a national level conference that's hosted in IIG, the Institute of Economic Growth, which is where Sanjay, our PI, is located in India. In UK, we have this project initiation workshop where it's really the start. We'd like to get ideas from you. We'd like to get some feedback and maybe some support in the future. We also have, at the end of the project, we have planned an international conference here in London, so in 2 years' time, in which we will have a simultaneous project exhibition and a catalogue. So So the exhibition will be really all the visualization of our GIS maps. We want to create story maps, our animated infographics, so all of the visual material that we get, and even otherwise, we would like to do a public exhibition here. We have plans for inviting important policymakers, planners, and think tanks, particularly those working with smart city consultants in India. There's a lot of to and fro between India and UK in terms of building resource capacity. So we plan to do that at the end of the project in London. And I think that's it. Great. Thank you.